Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, as you know, every so often I like to buy faulty or busted graphics cards to try and fix them and then see what they can do when it comes to games. Now, a few people always ask me, is this a good idea to turn into a business? Could you effectively make money buying these busted graphics cards and then selling them on for a profit after fixing them? And today I want to talk about my long-term experiences in doing this. Not to sell, but just how these graphics cards have held up after a supposed fix, to give you some sort of idea of how often this will work and how often it won't. So to start with, I'm going to play you some footage from a video I recorded a couple of days ago after I purchased a faulty R9 390X from eBay for a very cheap price. Now in today's one I want to talk about another bargain that I found online, and that is this card right here. This is an R9 390X from AMD and I paid just 35 British pounds for it, roughly 45 US dollars. Now normally these retail for anywhere between 150 to 200 pounds here in the UK, so why is this one so cheap? Well, of course there's a catch, and I want to talk about that right now. The first thing to notice though was that strangely the serial number has been peeled off. Now that's quite unusual. I don't know why you'd purposely peel the serial number off the back of the card. So the first thing to do was actually see if we did have an R9 390X here and not some imposter, which wouldn't be too surprising considering the amount we paid for this thing. Now I managed to find a different product number on the back of this card, which reveals it is indeed an R9 390X, but an HP variant of the card, meaning it would have been found in pre-built HP Envy systems, for example. Now the seller said that it crashes during stress tests. This could be anything from overheating to a hardware related issue, but I have a feeling that perhaps the power supply they used wasn't powerful enough, because I've seen that happen a couple of times before. So this is the R9 390X, and I can't actually show you that working in the test system because I've since cleaned off all the thermal paste and the thermal pads from underneath the heatsink. Now this card actually worked fine for a few minutes, I'd like to say. Plugged it into the system. There were a few artifacts that began to show up just sitting at the Windows desktop, and when I fired up Bioshock Infinite there was artifacts everywhere. This is not a hard game to run by today's standards, but even that was too much strain on the GPU here. And when I updated the drivers, the screen went blank. I uninstalled the drivers with Display Driver Uninstaller, a free program that's very handy. Fired it up again and nothing. So I'm afraid the £35 or $45 R9 is no more. Yes, I know. Yes, it's not. It's broken, isn't it? It's broken. Now the seller said this crashed on stress testing, but there really wasn't much stress being put on this GPU at all. So although it was very cheap, I now know why. Now obviously the card was on its way out and not fit for purpose, so in one last attempt I did try the bake it in the oven method. I've shown you how to do it before. I wouldn't really recommend it unless you're desperate and have an outside oven to avoid the fumes filling your house, but I tried it. I managed to get the card working again. This footage is from the R9 390X running Bioshock Infinite, artifact free. However, a couple of hours after that the card just gave up again. The picture just jammed. We jammed on one frame in a certain level before the screen just went black. So if I had fixed that, assumed it working, and then sold it on a site like eBay, it would have come straight back to me because it wouldn't have lasted more than a day inside someone's gaming rig. Now obviously I can't speak for every GPU out there. This may work for a longer period of time with some graphics cards and maybe an even shorter period of time with others, but it's never a 100% guaranteed thing that it's going to work at all, and when it does, it's not guaranteed that it's going to last. The R9 390X didn't even need a stress test, it just really didn't want to work anymore. Now the next GPU I want to follow up with is the £20 GTX 780 that we tested in late January. Now the problem with this was that it could boot to Windows just fine, but trying to install the drivers for it yielded a black screen. Now we were able to combat this with a BIOS flash using a free program found on Tech Power Up, and after this was done we tested out Battlefield 5, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a couple of games perfectly fine. They ran very well and there were no issues. Since then though, I've been using this for a few weeks on and off, and well, it's time to give you the news, because obviously there were some more underlying issues here. Right, so here we have the Ryzen 5 system with the Palette 780 inside. I said I was going to test that out again a couple of weeks after the original video, but here we are. And I've been using it on and off for a few weeks now. Yes, I know, we have, haven't we? And I've got a little bit of bad news. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The card does not even output a display anymore. It died, I'd say, a few days after I put the first video out there. So yeah, I'm afraid the 780 Jetstream edition is no more. We can't get a display at all. I've tried it with a CPU that features integrated graphics in order to reflash the BIOS again, and no luck. Just no picture, nothing. I've tried different power supplies, different output sources around the back there, and I'm afraid it's game over for the 780. Yep, there's simply nothing we can do, is there? Nothing we can do. Now if you've been here a while, then you might remember the R9 290 that I picked up last June. Now this had a very temperamental problem whereby it would crash. The seller thought this was due to high temperatures, but it turned out that flashing the BIOS once again on this seemed to resolve the issues with this card. Now I actually sold this on a couple of months after usage, and it's strange really because I purchased it in the June, ran it every so often in my system problem free, though one day it just decided to black screen during gameplay. The temperature wasn't particularly high and I thought, you know what, I'm going to sell it on as faulty. However, it only occurred once, so I'm still in two minds about whether or not this card was fixed or not. It was certainly a lot better than when I first picked it up. Yeah, it's a bit hit and miss when it comes to the R9 290. It seemed to have been fixed for a few months, though it did have that day where it decided not to work properly. But the new owner, after I sold it on eBay, gave me positive feedback and said it works perfectly. So there we go. Right, the HD 6950, last but not least, this is a card I picked up a couple of weeks ago now. It's still running perfectly fine. This was the simplest fix of all. Now the only problem reported by the seller for the 6950 was that it was very, very loud, which it was, as you probably heard if you watched that video. So loud in fact the neighbours asked me what I was doing at 11 o'clock, was I vacuuming? The fix to this was fairly simple. All we needed to do was clean the card up, install the latest drivers, and this fixed the noise issues because the fan started to regulate itself. It didn't do so before we'd cleaned it, but it did afterwards, and since then it's been running just fine. I've even sold it on, and I think I've received positive feedback for that one as well. But of course that sounded like a very minor issue all along, and as long as the new owner keeps those drivers installed, there won't be any noise, any significant noise should I say, coming from that GPU. So another reason why this always doesn't work out in your favour is because if a seller's listing a graphics card as faulty, more often than not they'll state that there are no returns because you've knowingly purchased it broken. Now because of this, they can write whatever they want in the listing description. They could say, oh yes, it does work, but when it gets to a certain temperature it might not work at all, when in actual fact it might not even display an image to start with. And you as a buyer can't do anything about it. You will get lucky on occasion though, like I did with the 6950, which it turns out just needed a good clean and a recent driver installation to get it working 100%, and I actually sold that on, as I said, for a cheeky profit too. So I hope whoever is out there that's gaming with that card right now is enjoying it. So there we have it. Now I hope you've enjoyed this video. The reason I wanted to make it was because I wanted to show you that things aren't always going to work out perfectly, even if you do manage to fix a graphics card in the first place. There's no way of telling how long that fix is going to last, and in my case I'd say the long-term solution success rate here was about 50%. It really does depend on what the problems are with the card in the first place. You know, a slight issue may hide something a lot bigger, and you might only find out what that is after a couple months usage, so it's worth bearing something like that in mind. I also wanted to show you that, hey, you know, I'm not some sort of expert in repairing these cards. I just do what I can to them, and I think that this long-term testing should definitely help some of you out if you're considering purchasing something like this in the first place. It makes no sense in making a video where I fix something and never following up on it, because that doesn't tell you all you need to know, in my opinion. With all that said then, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like on it. If you didn't, leave a dislike on it. Let me know if you've ever purchased a faulty GPU and it's still working today. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.